Hello and welcome, I'm JD, and this is the November update for Nebulous Fleet Command, being update 0.2.2.38, and this will focus on fleet editor improvements. So a feature that has been requested for a long time is the ability to now access the fleet editor from single player and multiplayer lobbies. So you can see here on the screen, I have a multiplayer lobby up with just myself in it, and it's just me. But if I come to this little button next to the fleet that I have selected, which is the defaults Task Force Ash starter fleet at the moment, and I click that, we can now actually enter into the fleet editor. So from the fleet editor, you can now make all your changes. You can do whatever you want to do. So if you jump into a game, you realize that, hey, look, I want to add a few extra pieces here, or tweak this, or maybe I don't have enough points and I want to add in an extra missile, for example. You don't have to leave a lobby now. People don't have to try and hold that position for you, and then someone joins and you have to kick them, and it's all that sort of unfortunate tap dance. You can just do that here in the editor, and then when you're happy, you can go back to the lobby and return and get ready to start the game. Now, one thing to be aware, you see that I have a Task Force Ash here. If I was to open the fleet editor like I did previously, and then load a new fleet, and upon returning now to the lobby, you'll see that I have Task Force Birch now loaded in. So whatever fleet you have when you return from the fleet editor back to the lobby is the one that you will load. Now, if you are the person who is the host, or if you are playing single player, you can also do the exact same thing now for AI players by adding a CPU and then going into the fleet editor again. So there have been a few changes to the fleet editor itself. So if you are in multiplayer, you will now be able to access the chat from the lobby. So if you are editing something in here, I recommend that you come down, you open this up so that you can see what everyone's still talking about. If the game is getting ready to ready up and then load in, you don't want to be sitting in here building a fleet. You want to probably just come in, make your edit and return. This is a good way just to keep track of what's happening. As you can see, as I move through, it doesn't really encumber the fleet at all. If I was to add a battleship, for example, I can still sort of see that. It's a little bit high. It does clip a little bit there, but it's really just the bottom mount, and you could probably just change that, close it down, and then open it back up. Now you can access this from initial formations and over in the missile designer as well. It just depends on what you're actually doing. If you do have this closed and you do receive notifications, you will receive a little pop-up message or indicator. It'll say the number of new messages that you have received. Now, I can't do that or show you what that looks like, whether it's red, green, in number, in a box, is it to the left, right, above, because I'm testing this by myself and I need other people to assist to do that. And it's not really worth getting someone else on just to simply get that like 3 seconds of footage. So returning to the normal fleet editor, I'll go through all the other changes that have been made within the fleet editor. As you note that there is no chat window now down here. So the first one here at the bottom of the screen here, we have both an undo with a shortcut being Control-Z and a redo, Control-Y. So if you're familiar with any sort of Microsoft Office package, it's pretty much exactly the same. So if I add a component now, let's add an antenna. I can undo that antenna. I can redo that antenna. And let's just test it out. Can I add a few different things? Yeah, you can. So let's just see what else you can add it to. This is the first time I'm actually interacting with it. Do we have any missiles? Yeah, it'll work. So although it won't do, by the looks of it, it won't do sort of increments of 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll just do all 4. Now, if I use Control-Z and Control-Y, it adds them all back in. If you have modded components, or if you're a person who uses a lot of mods, and you're always wondering, well, which components are the modded ones in? You can now see which components have a mod, which are modded into the game by the little modded icon that sits next to the component within the game. So that'll work for mounting compartment and the modules, and it'll also tell you what mod that it has come from. So you don't have to now worry about which one is vanilla, which one isn't. Is this part of this mod package or that mod package? It's just going to tell you for you. The next thing that has been added is a points breakdown cost. This one has been requested a few different times. So just by hovering now over the breakdown, So as I drag my mouse across, point cost, points, as long as you are hovering over the breakdown, it'll now give you a breakdown between hull command, weapon sensors, EWA, engineering, missiles, and other. I'm not 100% sure what other is. It probably encapsulates everything that isn't above. So it'll give both a hard points cost and then a percentage. So for example, on this frigate here, you can see that I've spent 50% of its points is simply just the hull existing. And then we've got things such as command. Now that could be the CIC for 10 points. Yes, it is. And it likely then relates to some of these points breakdowns corresponding with various different pieces of information. Now you'll also be able to see that too when you come into adding a new hull. You'll see that each have their own breakdown, and at the initial part they're just going to tell you basically what is that hull points cost. If I was to add in a sprinter, for example, it's just going to tell you what that base hull is, plus the command, the sensors, and the engineering, which at this point each ship comes with that basic CIC, the reactors, the drives, and the radars, and that is your initial costs. And then after that, if I was, for example, to start removing these, you can see that the hull is simply just 100%. So this is where the patch notes simply say to, as a note to modders, you'll need to indicate a component's cost breakdown class and its configuration, or it will always be grouped as other. So I take that being, if you're going to make yourself your own weapon, then you probably need to include that as a weapon class. Let's add something in here. There you go. If it's added to weapons, if you don't, then it'll simply become other. So if you're not a modder, that doesn't apply to you, but something to keep in mind if you are, or you intend to. All right, so the next thing now, and this is a nice addition, when you come under propulsion, let me just close all those and open that up. You'll now have added to the list is flank speed and the flank damage probability. Now, flank speed is 50% or is a 50% increase of your top speed. So you can see here that it's auto calculating. You know, if you've got a top speed of 20 meters per second and you go to flank speed, it'll go to 30. As you start to add more modifiers, it's now going to change. Likewise, it's now going to change and do that calculation for you. And likewise, flank damage probability has now been added as both a base value as well as the modifiers. So if we can see that in action if we were to modify a few of these drives. So here you can see the flank damage probability is minus 30%. So we can add that in. You can see that it goes down to 2.81%. Plus it has the green positive modifiers off to the right-hand side. And then the linear thrust is also there as well. Now if we come back in and change that maybe to a whiplash, you can see where the modifiers are now coming into play, and that we're more likely to take flank damage probability because it's the hull is offsetting some, and then the whiplash is adding some as well. So there's now a 5.56% chance. We can see that in a little bit more effects if we were to use a voxel, for example, and add a whiplash onto it. And you can see that we quickly start to increase the flank damage probability. And that's going to be the percentage chance every tick that you'll take damage to your thrusters. So if you're looking to build something around a whiplash drive, or you're simply weighing up the risk, you're now informed on how to do that. And straight away, that flank damage speed is now up to 46.8%. Really nice feature, and one that I'm really keen to also now try is that when you come into menu, we also now have what is the testing range. Now the testing range is effectively the small testing range map that has been set up so that you can directly access it from the fleet editor. So the fleet that you have loaded, so you can see the fleet in the background of this menu, is the fleet that I'm going to take into the testing range. So you're testing the fleet that you already have selected. When I select this button, it's now going to ask me, well, which enemy fleet do you want to pick? So this is the fleet that I'm going to fight against. So I'm going to select Task Force Oak, and it's going to load me into the game. And then when it loads in, there'll be a few small differences than what you would normally have within the small testing range. For one, the AI has been immediately turned off. And so if you're expecting the enemy to do something, for example, you're not going to be able to do that here. However, I can now take all actions in order to target the enemy and engage them so that I can test out maybe my weapons loadout, maybe my sensors. I can do all that now from here. So if you don't have a dummy build that you want to fight against, for example, now's probably the time to build one. Or if you always like to test against a fleet that you currently have, then you can just do that as well. Now, you can always use the console commands as well, so I can always take control of the enemy. And for me personally, now I can go through one less step in order to actually give these ships orders and have them do things that I would normally do, but I would have to type in additional commands over into the small testing range, plus setting it all up and whatnot. So if you're a person who also likes testing, then don't forget that you can still use AI commands. You can't see that, so let me suspend visibility. True, there we go. You can now, so if you're a person who likes to set up tests and like to test certain things, you've now effectively removed the need to type in 2 commands. You simply just need to take control of the enemy, and if you like to see the enemy as well, then you can do exactly what I did and turn the visibility on. So you only have to enter 2 commands now instead of the previous 4. So when you return to the editor, and you just do that by going into the menu, we're going to go back. It'll still give me a battle report, so I can still test out exactly and see exactly what I was doing, and then back to the fleet editor to tweak my ships again before we go back in and then do further testing or refinement of my various fleets. So one thing that you may or may not notice if you use the spectator mode a lot with this patch, there is a small change in the sizing of the 2 fleet indicators up in the left and right hand side of the screen. So they have been made a little bit smaller, but we now have more of a viewing area in the middle of the screen so that we can keep up with the action. All right, so I hope I explained this next change well. The patch notes say that seekers set to reject unvalidated targets will no longer stage prematurely when being jammed. So this was further clarified by Mazer as a comment on the Steam patch notes, is that this fix is that hybrids which use any kind of active radar seeker will no longer stage immediately upon encountering jamming if they have a validator set to reject unvalidated targets. So what I believe was occurring, because I haven't been seeing this as much as probably people who see it every day, is that when certain missiles were coming under the effects of a jammer or a blanket jammer or radar jamming, is that they were immediately staging, and then that was effectively causing them to either miss because their sprint stage was running out, or causing other unintended effects. So what should occur is that a fixed active radar seeker, also any of these sort of active radar seekers up the top, up here, if you have a validator on your missile, so this is a wake homing seeker in a validation mode, and you've set it to reject. So if the primary seeker, which is the active seeker, is looking for something, the wake homing seeker is not validating that. So basically you're not getting that sort of double check between the seekers, then it's not going to stage even when you jam it. Now, I didn't really know how to show you that because obviously it's been patched. I don't have any pre-footage. So yeah, play with that one. Let me know if you have encountered that situation. Maybe you can explain it a little bit better than I in the comments, because I think that would be good if anyone's had that experience or that particular use case or scenario that has been occurring, just to shed a little bit more light on that. The final update for this patch is that the auto syncing of mods in multiplayer lobbies has temporarily been disabled. So if you want to set up and I'm looking at anyone who's particularly in the role-playing service or really likes to play with the modded fleets or the modded maps or anything like that, just make sure that you have those things installed prior to you actually entering into a game. And so if you are a person who's consistently playing various different maps, it's probably good to just have a number of maps installed and then add additional weapons and ships as required. At some point that will be turned back on. All right, so that's it for this update for November. That being said, there is a devlog that is due to release this weekend from the development team. So hopefully we'll be able to see more of the OSP weapons and any other work that they have been doing and how that's all progressing, because I think the devlogs are one of the most enjoyable parts of seeing what's coming out. I haven't completed the sort of analysis from the previous one, so hopefully I'll get that up beforehand so you can see sort of the lineup if you haven't already over on the Discord, and then you'll be able to come and see and be up to speed when the devlog does drop. So as always, thanks for watching and take care.